6 o'clock by virtue of the town's chimes. The time for which this meeting, November 1st, is called to order. If you all could rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our agenda tonight, after the call to order, is approval of minutes, superintendent's report, assistant superintendent, and director of finance and operation reports, the school committee's reports, citizens' requests, domestic and international overnight field trip, approval request, and then a series of presentations and discussions, one on MCAS performance, school committee goals, budget presentation number 2, Asset Valley Collaborative, first quarterly update, and adjournment at the end of that. So with that, is there a motion on minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from October 18th, 2023.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second the minutes.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0. Excuse me, moving on, superintendent's report.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. The last 2 weeks have been smooth and busy in a good way. Our fall sports teams are finishing up, and I think Hallie might have some data on that. Last week, I had previewed with you that we would be having the Screenagers, which was co-hosted by us and Youth and Family Services and the Square One work to show looking at media and phone impact on youth, mental health, and also just distractibility and all other types of things, and just the change in cultural norms. That's a series of 3 movies. We had about 130 people come. It was a really quality attendance and good conversation. People stayed afterwards to talk a little bit. And then there are 2 more shows that will happen across the span, I think between now and January. We'll certainly send those out again, but I really thought it was well attended. Thank you to, I think it was National Honor Society that provided some student coverage for young students, and then older students attended with their parents. I think really led to good quality conversations and just kind of the educational support we want to provide as families are navigating, thinking about how they want to work with their children to leverage technology uses. So I'm looking forward to that as an ongoing series. The town trick or treat occurred, which was really, really enjoyable. We had hundreds of students and families, and it was very festive and enjoyable. And then this week, of course, last night was trick or treating for many families, and so there's a good sugar energy in the buildings today. I was over at Hastings to start the morning, and people were coming in a really good mood and just kind of a nice kind of enjoyable week. So I am pleased with just the progress of normalcy and academic focus, which is just where we want to be this stage of the year, and things are going well. So that's my report for tonight.
Good. Daniel?
Just a quick update that our professional development day is coming next Tuesday, and the entire district going to be involved by building and grade levels in a variety of activities. A lot of it's focused on the universal design for learning, professional development that we started last year, which is all about instructional precision and ways of being effective in the classroom and reaching all learners. We're going to be, at the elementary level, the science, social studies, English, and math coordinators are going to break off with teams to work with them. The director of fine arts will be working with his department, and the wellness director will similarly be working with his department. That's my report.
Very good.
And tonight, I think we would have a phone presence from our Director of Finance, and we'll give her a moment to say hello and provide a brief update for the committee. Anita, we'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Amber and I have been working on our FY25 budget for the past couple weeks. I'd like to say that we're making great progress. We've been meeting via Zoom and telephone call. We have met with all the principals thus far, and we're going to be meeting with various other departments between the rest of this week and the beginning of next week.
Very good.
Thank you, Anita. It has been seamless. I just want to give a shout out to the fact that after having severely broken her leg as our new Director of Finance Administration, Anita has been doing an amazing job to maintain working full days, meeting with people via Zoom, making calls, the organizational work, and then doing the independent work she needs to do to look at all the numbers in 24 and start to roll them to 25. I feel like we're on track for the benchmarks that I'll highlight to you when I get to the budget presentation. So she's been pretty amazing, and I just want to thank her for her focus and effort.
Thank you. Hallie, school committee reports, and our young lady at the end.
So SUCO was able to put on a haunted house student council for anyone not at the schools. And they had a lot of attendees. They were very pleased with that. The Gibbons Sustainability Squad is starting up. They're having their first meeting, I think, this week or next week. And I'm very excited about that personally. And then winter sports are preparing for their season. And as a senior, we're all very happy that the first round of college applications are done.
Congrats.
And playoffs start next week. Well, end of this week.
This week, yeah.
This weekend, yeah.
All of our teams are moving into playoffs, which feels really good.
Awesome. Yeah.
Cool.
Nothing to report tonight.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone about the 10th annual Turkey Trot is Saturday, November 18th. The 5K run starts, or walk, if you want to walk with me, starts at 9 a.m. at the high school, and then there's a kids' fun run for ages 3 to 11 at 10 a.m. So we look forward to that. And also, Amber, you had mentioned the screenagers, so I just have the flyer for that. And then next film is called The Next Chapter. So it's the second film in the series, and that's going to be offered on November 28th at the high school. And then the third film, called Under the Influence, is January 9th. So,
And I think at the second one, there's going to be a panel afterwards of
Yes.
students who will be talking about phone impact. I think also then some adults that they've been bringing in. So should be really a productive, interactive session.
yeah, yeah. And then just reminding everyone that Westborough Connects is sponsoring Kindness Week, which is coming up November 5th through the 11th. And there's a kickoff event on the 5th at Westborough High School from 2 to 4, drop-in activities for all ages. And you'll see these signs all throughout businesses and organizations in town, and there's all kinds of activities going on all week. So thank you for everyone who's volunteering and helping out with that.
And I think they'll be collecting extra Halloween candy if you want to bring it in, and that goes into service troops that are abroad. And I know that one of the table activities we run are letters and stationery cards to those in active service duty currently. And that was a very popular table last year for all ages, and we really were able to turn out a giant number of personal connection cards. So I think it's a really great event. I encourage people to come.
Great, thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Nothing to report tonight.
Sarah?
Nothing to report.
And neither do I. Things are quiet on the construction front. Next order of business is citizens' requests. Read
Sure.
please.
Yep. So before we begin, I just want to remind everyone, excuse me, of the school committee's policy regarding citizens' requests. You must be a current resident of Westborough. Speakers can address the school committee about issues within the school committee's purview and authority, and each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak to the school committee. Written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting, And you're welcome to hand the chair any additional comments in writing tonight or send them via email, and the chair will share them with the other school committee members. Public comment by residents at this meeting is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It's an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority, and our role is to listen carefully to what you have to share with us. Clapping, cheering, or calling out, or any other noise during or following a speaker is not allowed. At the close of citizens' requests, school administrators may address what was shared by the speakers if they wish to do so, and additional individual follow-up with a speaker may take place in the days and weeks following a school committee meeting. So can we just see a show of hands of those who are interested in, okay, how do you want to organize?
Procedurally, we'll move from the first row to the back, my left to right. Lloyd, please come up.
And just as a reminder to state your full name and street address and speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Boyd Conklin, 8 Water Street. Hello, groomers. And I expect you to keep that title because the state of Massachusetts and the federal government want to keep you on the path. And so I imagine it's very hard for you to get off that path, especially with the LGBTQ XYZ lobby not putting up with any detractors. Get the LGBT XYZ singularly promoted iconography out of Westborough schools. Talked to a teacher last night providing us with some behind-the-curtain information on Westborough schools, the administration forcing teachers to upgrade, raise the grade of students to keep them progressing through the system. Perhaps we, as citizens, can create a Project Veritas WikiLeaks portal for anonymous administrators, teachers, and/or students to relay information, because as we have seen, the current school committee and superintendent/curriculum director seem to be reticent to operate in a transparent manner for whatever reasons they may have. I believe the path of least resistance is my take on your strategy. Here's a little article from the Free Press, Gender Affirming Care, Dangerous Finland Doctor. So this is the Finland doctor talking here. It is dangerous. Gender affirming care is dangerous. I know because I helped pioneer it. My country and others found there is no solid evidence supporting the medical transitioning of young people. Why aren't American clinicians paying attention? So, as on a side here, we've seen with the Wu vaccine and the masking and the at-home schooling, the Westborough School Committee is very slow in taking the lead in not doing things, and they tend to just go along. So this is another instance where they're probably just going to go along with this until it becomes not the thing to do. Anyways, this gal who led the Finnish stuff, Finland's national medical body, COHERE, released its findings and recommendations regarding youth gender transition. It concluded that the studies touting the success of gender-affirming model were biased and unreliable systematically. So in some cases, the authors wrote, in light of available evidence, gender reassignment of minors is an experimental practice. The report stated that young patients seeking gender transition should be...
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Ted Gilbert, 26 Charles Street. All right. Originally started as grassroots efforts with noble intentions. The diversity, gay pride, anti-racist, and trans social movements, as well as the gender identity, CRT, DEI, SEL, and ESG slurry of ideologies, have been combined and packaged into a new product, a new religion, by the teachers' unions, the Washington swamp, the global elites, the corporatocracy, and the big pharma healthcare monopolists. Whether it's struggling authors selling LGBTQ teen books, or global retail brands looking for new customers, or DEI and SEL consulting firms selling half-baked curriculum to naive school systems, or plastic surgeons buying a Bugatti, there's big money in prostituting our children's innocence. All of the elements of religion are present: high priests, guiding principles, symbolism, human sacrifice, and the concept of transcendence. The name of the new religion is LGBTQ+, and the symbol of the new religion is the rainbow and the rainbow flag. To be a loyal follower of this new religion is to move along the sexuality and gender spectrum, away from genetics and traditional gender roles and the role of family towards ever-expanding permutations of lifestyles, identity, and biology, eventually to a hellscape of human existence. The sexual grooming of children by adults is an inevitable symptom of this unwholesome new religion, because children are rewarded and celebrated to interpret any feeling through a sexual or sexual identity lens, and that to follow through physically is necessary for their well-being. Like jumping headfirst into the volcano, becoming transgender is the ultimate self-sacrifice in the name of the new religion, and the role of God is the state itself. The purpose of this new religion is to create a fractured society of confused people, less likely to procreate and who are enslaved to the state and to the healthcare complex. Like the cross or crucifix is the symbol of Christianity, the rainbow or the rainbow flag is the symbol of this new religion. Go to any of our public schools or to the library here in Westborough, and there are rainbows and rainbow flags everywhere. The Establishment Clause of the First Amendment has made it clear that public schools cannot promote religious beliefs and symbols. Religious symbols that are sacred to many, but not all, needlessly and unconstitutionally divide the country along religious lines. It is illegal and unhealthy and un-American for the Westborough Public Schools to promote the new LGBTQ religion with rainbows and rainbow flags. To be equitable, to be kind, the only symbol that should be in our taxpayer-funded schools is the symbol that represents us all, the American flag.
Thank you. Do you want to speak, sir? Do you want to speak? No? Paula? Mike?
Mike raised his hand to speak. Mike Matthew?
Okay, so Mike Noonan, 4 Rosewood Place. First off, Daniel, I wanted to acknowledge the email you sent to me yesterday, indicating that you're starting to evaluate the material that's being taught in global studies. While we think that's a good first step, we also wanted to follow up on the comments that you had made a couple of weeks ago regarding global studies. It seemed that the focus of those comments was on the quantity or distribution of the material that's being taught, and the idea that the scales are being balanced by less biased material that's being taught in other classes. We think it's important, though, to keep the focus on the impact that this material is having on our students. And we can look at what's happening on college campuses to get a sense of that. We've seen violent anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests breaking out on campuses across the country. Last week, a poll revealed that 84% of Americans side with Israel in the conflict. But among 18 to 24-year-olds, college age, almost half side with Hamas, and over half, 51%, believe that while the violence committed against innocent Israeli citizens was genocidal, that genocide was justified. This raises the question of how these college-age Americans can break so sharply with other Americans on these issues. And I think the answer can be found in what students are being taught. I doubt that these students have ever learned very much about contemporary Middle Eastern history. What they have learned is that the world can be split into two groups, oppressors and victims, and that these groups can be rationalized using class, race, and gender. It should sound familiar given what we've been talking about for the last several weeks. In this mindset, Israeli children are coded as white and coming from a country with power, so they cannot be victims. People of color are always virtuous, and they're always victims. The issue isn't about opinions on the Middle East. It's about how students are being equipped to interpret events like this. It's very likely, and we've seen it, that the material being taught in the Westborough schools right now is the same material that these students on these college campuses are being taught. The same ideologies, the same readings, by the same authors. So perhaps the question is not whether the material is only being taught in some of our classes, or that global studies only runs for a couple of months, or that this material somehow provides our students with a balanced perspective. The things that are happening on college campuses right now give us a good idea of where this kind of biased, misguided teaching may be leading our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it'd be better if you said,
Know that that's,
That mic doesn't work, though.
I think it'd be better,
So,
sorry,
have a seat.
make yourself comfortable at the
I feel
table.
like I'm looking up to the
I'm
sky,
sorry.
you know, God is up there. Yeah, Canario and Escondillo, I was here, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, and I expressed my concern about my child, who was 3 years old at the time, was being asked to paint the color of her skin, and it was told the reason was because, well, one of the reasons was that because white people don't understand was the reason why I had a problem with it. And someone, I think the assistant principal made a comment at the following meeting after I spoke that I had a predisposition, and that's why my opinion was what it was. No twisting, I didn't twist anything, which is what you had stated. I just said what I saw and what I heard, and that's basically it. I'm not sure what predisposition you're talking about, whether it's boys are boys and girls are girls, or black and white, doesn't matter. But those are my beliefs. And I think they're basic beliefs that I have. And it's not anything to do with your system. Was totally open when I brought my child to your school. And when I saw this, it got to me, and so I went to the principal, and that's when I was told white people don't understand. So that's basically what happened. And one other thing I'd like to just mention is that you, Amber, had mentioned something about Miss Tanya's, that they do the same kind of stuff. No, my daughter's been going there 4 years. Never once has she been asked to paint the color of her skin. Never once has she been told boys can have babies, which is basically what someone in your school was told. One of the third graders came home and told their parents that boys can have babies, and now the father can't. It's not a joke. That's what was told. And how do you explain to your child that your teacher says one thing and now you've got to tell them something else? This is the reason why we're here, because you're smug and you don't listen to people. Very condescending. That's all I got to say. I don't want to get upset.
Thank you.
Good evening. I prefer to stand. Mike Matthew, Andrews Road, 20 Andrews Road. Susan, Paula, and Michael Noonan, along with several other Mama Bears and Papa Bears from our parent group, which consists of 30 to 40 Westborough families, worked very hard these last 4 or 5 months to put together some factual classroom examples on age-inappropriate topics such as racism, DEI, transgenderism, and the overall sexualization of our most precious asset, our children. These parents come from various persuasions and backgrounds, but one thing they all care very deeply about is the health and future well-being of the children. Therefore, they felt compelled to expose the evilness that no one else seems to want to talk about. In the coming weeks and months, we hope to be able to work with the school committee to effect some positive changes for all. In that vein, we all understand your 3-minute rule, but I'm asking if you could handle it a little more politely. In other words, when the presenter's 3 minutes are up, could you kindly say something like, "Mike, kindly wrap up in your 3 minutes," or as your 3 minutes are over, and give the person time to finish their thought or sentence. This way, we know you are listening and paying attention to what's being presented instead of looking at your watch or clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments, Amber?
All right. We'll do a couple key summaries of pieces as we go. I want to be respectful to all the pieces of feedback. I think our goal was to make sure that without going into depth, we want to be respectful of people's right to come and appreciate and share feedback. And we hope to be able to provide any clarifying thoughts if they're current that we can do so, or to report back at the next meeting. We appreciate that feedback. We do work to be transparent. That doesn't mean that we will always agree or that we will come to a place where the core curriculum of the Westborough Public Schools satisfies everybody's perspective of what should be included or not included. But we do want to be clear about what we are doing, and we work to be transparent in that work. I think I have confidence in the strong educational experience that we are providing our students, and we have long partnered with families as part of that experience. We are willing to take feedback, and we do work with people to meet in the areas of taking feedback, and when we see areas where we can correct or improve or grow practice, we're willing to do so. The feedback, when it's shared, allows us to reflect and gives us an opportunity to get better at this work. At the same time, it provides us the necessary opportunity to clarify if we are teaching something, that it's within that core curriculum and would be within the standards, and there's a reason why it's in the curriculum. We support the curriculum that was included, that we have discussed thus far. I want to thank Mr. Noonan for giving us time to follow up with him, and I know that Daniel was able to send him an email and met with the teacher to have a thorough and thoughtful conversation, and she welcomed feedback and was very open to the discussion around curriculum and the content she was teaching. Good professionals are willing to hear feedback and to work in those directions of growing. I hope that we can be clear that we work to present a balanced curriculum that looks at a variety of perspectives. I'm going to let Daniel report on his conversation with the teacher around that global studies class. And I want to be clear that we take every piece of feedback seriously. I'll offer one clarification before handing it over to Daniels, and I want to be fair. I work hard when we're having conversations not to make comments that I feel compromise other people. I mentioned Ms. Tanya's because my children went there. And what I mean in the sense that my children had very similar experiences is that multicultural crayons have long been, for many years, I mean, Sarah's now 26, and when she was already in kindergarten and first grade, multicultural crayons by Crayola were a part of the incorporated changes that were made by that company to allow children who had requested, saying that they didn't see themselves in those colors, to make a more accurate representation of themselves. And that's what I intended to be clear about, that my children have easily experienced, and Westborough school children have for years. So I think it's certainly appropriate as we're working with children when they do the drawing of self, that they represent themselves in a way that they feel good about. That is what the goal of the schools is. And if it is that you see yourself a certain way, you want to be able to find crayons and colors that represent that. That is the appropriate goal of that lesson. I would clarify that we do not have any curriculum and instruction that indicates that boys can have babies. I just want to be on record that if a child thought they heard something, I accept that that child carried that message home, but I want to be clear that our curriculum does not teach that. That is not a part of our core curriculum. We respect any parent who feels their child comes home with a message that they want to clarify. The most appropriate and direct path is to go to that teacher, to the building level principal, and to have conversations at that level around those areas of concern. I just want to look at the areas where I feel like I could make comments that I think are relevant to pieces of the curriculum. Those are the ones that I see. And other than that, I want to be clear that we have students in Westborough that have very full schedules across many faculty, many topics, and good work during their day. The content of our curriculum, preschool to grade 12, is hugely diverse in its complexities. It is understandable that a student may not agree with some of the topics that they are exposed to. We allow them to develop their opinions and reactions to ideas, and we focus on choice and voice as students are moving through our core curriculum. I'll turn it over to Daniel, and I think he wanted to provide some comments tonight related to a follow-up from the conversation he had with the teacher that was working on her global studies curriculum.
Thank you. Yeah, so to elaborate on what Amber was saying about our Global Issues course, I've made this point before, but I'm going to do it again. And when you talk to the teacher and you look at the scope and sequence, the course's objectives are much more focused on academics than on the issues that are being picked out from a subset of slides and lessons. And so what I reviewed with the teacher was, these are the classes that she teaches. I'm putting them up here so you could see. The focus is on learning how to read nonfiction texts and annotate it and basically see how text structure works. They do a project where they're looking at nonfiction, and it's focused on the United Nations goals that are called the Sustainable Development Goals. Some of you may be familiar with them. And then after they study the goals and read them and do close readings of nonfiction text, they then look at sources and what is a reliable source and how do you define reliable sources and what are unreliable sources. And then they do this mini project that's an advocacy project and that's focused on the goals. And so, you know, when Mr. Noonan is taking some of the slides out, he's like taking a subset of these goals. The goals have to do with a wide variety of issues that children have to choose from to do their studies and their presentations on, everything from hunger to poverty to quality education to decent work and economic growth to industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And so you can pick out some slides which are ones that pertain to classism and racism, and those are part of the discussion in the class, and we don't have any problem with those topics being addressed, so long as they're in a balanced way.
Is that is the grid of?
This is the United Nations sustainable goals that they basically get to learn about, read about, and then when it comes to the issue of advocacy, I mean, one of the things, what I don't understand, and Mr. Noonan was saying, you know, he doesn't like the fact that we use the term advocacy, and I'm putting the definition up here of advocacy and activism. They're both what is happening right here before your very eyes with you guys coming out here to talk to us about issues you feel passionate about. We feel it's important for our teachers to work with the students, to have them figure out how to make arguments using nonfiction text, and that's what's the purpose of the goal of that class is. And so the fact that there's an advocacy project that links to one of the goals that they get to choose from, I mean, I don't think that condemns the academic nature of the class or what we're trying to teach kids. I mean, it gets to, I think, things that we can agree on is we want our kids to be able to think and argue and look at sources and make informed decisions using reliable sources. So that's, at this point, there are some parts of the curriculum I looked at with the teacher, and I said, I think you can, have some additional authors brought in. But when I looked through it and looked at the different component parts of what she's teaching, another part of it has to do with social media. There's a whole bunch of classes on social media and what is good social media and what is bad social media and how does social media impact the mental health of students. Another piece of that course is bringing the detectives and the policemen into the course, into the to meet with the students to talk about what it is, why they chose the profession that they're in. So there's a whole lot of dimensions to the course. And yes, it touches, again, as I say, on, they get into racism and classism. But Mr. Noonan and I have had this exchange before where, there's some isms that I think he feels like we shouldn't be teaching, but I don't know how to educate our children unless they understand there's a wide variety of isms. Not everybody agrees with, which isms should be taught: anti-Semitism, classism, progressivism, constitutionalism. And so when I'm told we should take certain isms out, it feels a little like censorship, and it doesn't really feel like a fair kind of portrayal of what it is we're trying to do in that class. So,
Were students, my understanding, just a point of clarification, that in looking at the content of the nonfiction reading that they did through the United Nations content, they could then pick areas of personal interest. So
Absolutely.
is the mini advocacy project, so if a student had read something in that content that was not something that they were particularly interested in or felt a match to, they could move to one of the other topics and pick something: partnership for the goals, responsible consumption, good health and well-being. They could find something, fighting against hunger, like they could pick something they felt. Certainly industry, innovation, and infrastructure. It feels like there is choice there, is my point. And something that we value is voice and choice. And there are students who might want to learn about gender equality. If that's an interest to them, it's available. But if it's not an interest, my feeling is that you affirmed with her that there's other avenues for students to make other choices.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's important.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that's all I have to add.
Great. So we'll try to make sure that one of the things we do is, one, stay open and be responsive, work with our families. We welcome feedback. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, and there might be times when we end up feeling that we've presented something that they might still disagree with, and vice versa. But we also are responsive to continue to grow, make changes, clarify information for people, and be sure that we have voice and choice. I think at the same time, conversations like this are important. I encourage that families need to speak to their classroom teachers, speak to the building principal. If they end up, and you can escalate it up to this level as well. You're at the highest level right now. You're sitting in front of the school committee and the superintendent and the director of curriculum. And that's a viable option as well. But I think sometimes clarifying down at the building level gives people opportunities. And I respect that many of these parents have done that. So I want to thank them for that and encourage them to continue that as part of their advocacy. I think it's provided aspects of intervention for them. And I think the faculty welcomes those discussions as well. So thank you. We'll continue to try to provide a structured update that at least puts us on record around areas where we want to provide clarification. Thank you.
The next order of business is the discussion of domestic and international overnight field trip. And the first one is robotics team request for a trip to Houston, Texas.
So Lou Lung is going to join us, and he is going to present the robotics overnight trip, and it's busy season for the robotics team. And again, I'm happy to have you here. I just have to give a shout out to Lou and his team. This is the most amazing group of parents who are working with our kids for academic excellence and high levels of work. Should be relevant. And I welcome you as an opportunity to share the work you do with our students.
Thank you.
Welcome.
The request here is to attend the first robotics competition of World Championships, which is in Houston this year. And so over the past dozen some odd years, the team has been so-so. You know, we have our good years, we have our bad years. And in the last couple of years, the team has done actually pretty well. And just so happens that this year's World Championships are right in the middle of April vacation week, which is great because it means that if you want to have the students go and travel for a certain number of days, it doesn't impact the school, the school calendar. So that's the motivation for saying, hey, let's give it a shot this year. Obviously, there's a bunch of prerequisites. We have to do well enough in our competitions. We have to qualify for the New England Championships, which requires us to be roughly in the top third of the number of teams. And then if we do well enough there, then we're invited to the World Championships. So a little history in recent years. So 2 years ago, we were ranked 20th in New England out of 182 teams. Last year, we dropped down to 40th. But in both years, we were invited and we declined. Again, it was the week after April vacation week, and we just didn't have well, first of all, we didn't anticipate going. And obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of planning the trip and all that. So this year, we figured, well, since it's just in the right time, we'll give it a shot. We'll start early. We'll do all the paperwork and give it a go. Do you want to? There is a video if anybody was interested in what the World Championships look like.
We send them the packet ahead of time, so I know they looked at the video. We won't do so live right now, but I'm going to be inviting the robotics team back in December. We're going to do a superintendent spotlight and have them in, and we'll do video then to share. How many do you have I think it's just the scope of this is important to be on record about. So how many students do you currently have?
So there are currently 61 students. This is at the high school. And so from all 4 grades. Team-wise, there's, again, in New England, there's a little under 200 teams. It's gone down since post-COVID. And the competition-wise, there'll be 600 teams represented from about 60-some-odd countries down in Houston. Worldwide is about 4,000, give or take, teams competing in this whole thing. And this is just at the high school level. There's more at the middle school level and below. So
you're talking hundreds of hours. I can't express enough. If you drive by the high school and you see the lights on, it's these guys. They put in such incredible amounts of time. Students are coding, programming, they are designing, they're welding, they're building. Their iterative design work is so impressive. And that's just the actual dynamic engineering and technological layer. I find that the team dynamic, the team building, the problem solving, the complexity is exactly what you want of a high performing district. These students are learning to face tough problems with other highly capable students, and it's just so impressive to spend time with them. And I just want to thank you, Lou, for the time that you've given. Over the years we've known each other, I'm just continually impressed by the mark he's left in Westborough on students who go off to careers, who are happy, and who are high performing. And I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you should approve his trip.
Do you anticipate taking any chaperones with you, or?
Yes,
parents?
we'll have to bring as many chaperones as we can. So a lot of it will have to be. So the good news is a lot of the parents, or a lot of the mentors who are involved, all want to go. So for many of us, it's like, hey, it's our first time going to a world championship and seeing what it's like. So yes, and then of course, depending on how many students are going. I did a quick informal poll, and right now we have about 24 who think they'll be able to go. Obviously, there's a lot of cost involved, so depending on whether or not they can foot the bill for, there's obviously the airfare, hotel, that sort of thing.
Yep. And are there? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So you would intend to fly?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine taking the bus down to Houston. They do run buses if it's one, depending on where it's going. In the past, the World Championships were in St. Louis, which would have been like a 24-hour almost drive. And then they actually moved it to Detroit, which would have been a little shorter. And then COVID hit, and for whatever reason, Houston became the next spot available, and that's where it is. They do these in like, I think, 3-year contracts with the venue. So who knows where it'll be next year, but
Yeah, that's my only question. It really sounds like a lot of fun for the kids.
It's so fun.
Do you know how you're going to be doing the transportation of the robots, et cetera? I mean, are you going to do it through a separate
Right.
carrier, probably, right?
Well, FedEx is a first sponsor, so they pay for everything for bringing everything into the truck, and they'll fly it down there for
Okay,
free.
super. So is that must be an additional cost for the team to bear, right? Or FedEx is
Right, so
taking care of
no,
this as a sponsor?
Yeah, FedEx
That's
does all that
wonderful.
for us.
That's great.
Yeah, we just shove it into a crate.
That's
They
amazing.
do a good amount of fundraising, and then we've increased over the years and gotten in alignment to make sure that just like we carry expensive sports teams, this is an expensive intellectual performance team. And so, we cover costs and help to pay for things, and are continuing willing to look at that student activity account to serve this group of students who are working really hard, so.
Yeah, my question was, are there like entrance fees and things? And I'm sure we can, that's part of the club and.
Right,
pay for
students
those
will
types
pay
of
for a
things, yeah.
trip, just like you're gonna hear Sue's gonna come and talk about that, and people will pay to go to that trip, because that's a special experience, but the entrance fees and those types of things, Lou can get reimbursed through the student activity account work. Now, sometimes he's over fundraised and he pays it himself, but, that, he can work that out and the funding, but like typically when they're going to local competitions or different things, like, we'll cover the buses, or we should be covering their base T-shirt because it's their uniform. And so I think we've continued to try to improve that structure. And, I think, but Lou's also, their team is so independent, they kind of get going and sometimes forget that piece.
And we have corporate sponsors who sponsor out the team pretty much annually. So, like Intel's one of them. Raytheon's been a long-time sponsor. So we work with all these, the regular sponsors, plus the ones that if we feel we need extra revenue for whatever reason, we'll reach out to certain local companies. Like, Bose has been very helpful. Staples, MathWorks, Boston Scientific. Who was it? Viasat gave us money last year. And a lot of it also depends on who has, so if you have parents or you have mentors who work in a certain company, or a particular company has a presence in town, they'll say, hey, if a certain person puts in a certain number of hours, we'll give money. So my own son, who went through this program, who actually now lives in Medford, he works for a company that's owned by Boeing, and he comes back and helps out, and Boeing said, oh, great, as long as you put in 25 hours, we'll give you $4,000.
Oh, that's
Great, so we do that. So.
I was going to say also, sometimes you can get, I don't know if robotics, if the organization, the national organization has this, but sometimes even individuals who have their own businesses can give small amounts and get tax write-offs too. So, I know that I've engaged in that type of thing before, so it's worth finding out, because a lot of people who have small businesses who may or may not want to have to give a lot, it's a benefit to them and it benefits the team, so.
Good point.
I have two questions. First of all, I was always very excited about this program, and I can't wait till my boys hopefully get into it too themselves. But my question was, have you done any interaction with Amazon Robotics in town?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you should ask that. So I've been trying to find my way in there. It's a little hard, but they actually reached out to me, and we're actually planning a trip, a tour, a visit in early December. So I'm working with the facilities manager over there. He wants to show off his brand new building. So we're going to go there. Right now it's planned for, I think there's a Friday, early December, where it's like an early release. So we'll bring a few students, the ones who want to go. And we'll do they're like these 1-hour tours. So we'll try and schedule like 3 1-hour tours. But my hope is once I'm there, I can find out, who else to talk to.
Oh, that's great. And the other question I had was, are you in touch with your former students? How, are they into robotics after they leave our schools? Any of them?
Yeah, I have some great stories, but I don't think we have time for that. But yeah, we have a lot of alumni. In fact, some of them come back to help out. So like I said, my son does that. We have a couple of other students, former students who work in the area. And they'll come back and mentor for, in their field of expertise.
You should take a field trip and see them some evening. I mean, you can go any night, they're there all the time. But if you go up, or Lou will show you, the kids will show you what they're doing and how they're working on things, and you can see the mentorship up close, which I think is an interesting real model of what mentorship looks like.
Yeah, I'd love to come.
Anybody's welcome to come anytime. I mean, in fact, we're there tonight. We're working on a competition that'll be for the 18th of this year, so this month rather. So we'll be working today, tomorrow, as well as the weekends, next couple of weekends. And,
Okay, I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Send you his contact, and
Yes.
you can reach out.
That'll be great. Thank
You
you.
can also just walk in, or I can take you over. They're over there.
Anybody else? Thank you.
So you need an approval?
I would like to make a motion to approve the robotics team trip to Houston, Texas during April vacation week.
I will second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Nice. Lou, enjoy. Good luck.
That's awesome. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Not good skill, not luck. Good luck.
Yeah,
and skill.
lots of skill.
So, thank you so much. And then I know Sue, we'd love to welcome you up. Sue is returning to propose a trip because the Australia trip really had some challenges, both distance and cost. And I gave you some notes on that. I think it's important to realize it takes years to establish a trip. And I think, so Sue's back here to talk a little bit more about some new ideas.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I teach English at the high school, and last year I did take students to Europe over April vacation. Tonight I'm proposing a trip to Amsterdam, Brussels, Paris, and London, also over April vacation. The trip will be coordinated through EF Tours, which is a company that we've used and trusted for years. It will start in Amsterdam. We'll fly into Amsterdam, see Anne Frank's house, the canals, take a train to Brussels, where we'll have a chocolate workshop, among other attractions, and then to Paris for the Louvre, Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and finally London with Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace, and other attractions there. So we'll fly out of London. The trip will be 9 days, and the cost will be $3,969 each student. And yes, the Australia-New Zealand trip didn't have enough interest to run the trip, so I'm hoping that at this time, another trip to Europe might be more suited for our families and students for different reasons. So that is my proposal.
Questions, comments?
Just one comment. It looks like a great trip. Too bad Australia didn't work out. I just maybe put a word in your ear for the future. Maybe the schools could one day consider trips to Eastern Europe or Central Eastern Europe. There's a lot to see. There's a lot of history. Might be cheaper too, but this sounds great.
I did actually propose one to Croatia and some of the countries on the other side of the ocean between Italy and Eastern Europe, or the sea geography. Yeah, that was several years ago, but it looked beautiful. It looked amazing. A lot of the countries that had changed historically. It was a great place to look at.
And I guess I would second that as well, particularly the Czech Republic. The Holy Roman Empire was the home was there for, 400 years or something like that. And of course, we in the United States really know nothing about that part of the world except, what's in the news today. And I think it would be a good trip for the future in terms of just world history and understanding not only the historical background, but the drivers in terms of what we see day to day today in the world and what we have to do. Ukraine is one, the background with Poland is another, and for that matter, a lot of things were ticked off as a result of what happened there in the 30s. So I think that would be a good suggestion as well. So I back up what Yakub had to say. But anyway, this is a great trip, and I'm sure the kids will enjoy it. Awful lot of things to absorb in just 9 days.
Right.
So, but it's great. Anybody else?
Is the travel in between mostly trains, or is there some flights? Because this is a lot of travel.
Yes.
In a short amount of time.
I know for sure the trip from Paris to London is the Eurostar, and I am not 100% certain about between Amsterdam and Brussels. But I know that the trains, especially through the major cities, are pretty
Very fast.
Yeah, pretty common.
Oh, yeah.
And luckily, those are the bigger ones that it makes sense.
And then here it has a price of $4,669, but you quoted a different price, so it's less than that. Okay.
They had made an error with the estimate, and we caught that, so.
Okay,
Which
great.
was great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it made it much more similar to the other trip that's going, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And easier for families, I assume.
Is there any chance this trip's going to intersect with the other trip in France? And
That would be wild.
Like, hey, you look familiar.
yeah, hey,
Right,
I
Do
know
a
right people.
selfie.
We will only be there for a couple days, but yeah, it could be the same days. That's possible. And it's the same tour company, so we could find out.
Yeah, I
We
know.
could check it out.
This sounds really interesting and a way to see a lot of Europe in a short amount of time.
Very good. Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'd like to move to approve this trip to Europe.
Second.
I second.
No other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0-0. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
you.
Sue.
Get some
Thank you
interest
for
and-
like
yeah.
jumping in with another idea. Like that feels really, it takes a lot of work to pull that stuff together. I just really thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very disappointing,
I know,
but I'm glad I gave that one a shot.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
someday.
maybe in the future. Thank you so
I think it
much.
was worth it to try. We probably learned some things about,
Yeah.
What
Yes.
we're kind of willing to do and not do, and I think that was helpful, to do that.
Last year, we had so many students travel, and this year is just not the same so
Yeah,
far, so.
It's different.
Lots of different reasons for those things, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Okay, next is MCAS performance report.
Okay. So this is our annual summary of the data that we get on how our students did last spring on their MCAS performance. As you're aware, there's a lot of data here. We have English, math, science tests. The students are tested in grades 3 through 8 every year. And then in the high school, they are tested in grade 10. The state brings out data. You can break it out by grade level, but they tend to do a 3 through 8 cluster, and then they look at the high school separately. So we do it the same. In part, they do the high school separately because the high school exams more focused on the content of like a particular year, like our science test is on biology, and it's more substantive in some ways and less global. So what I want to do is just walk you through a little bit. Here's the outline. Talk about our benchmark communities that we compare ourselves to as a way measuring how we're doing to other school districts that are similar to us. And I'll talk, explain a little bit about how we pick those communities. Differentiate between achievement scores and growth scores, so you understand the terminology, and then present the results to you, and then open it up for some discussion, okay? So the town got together officials from both the town, different departments in the town, police, fire, DPW, and the schools several years ago, and decided that we should use the same communities to benchmark ourselves on, so we're not just constantly going between different communities in different reports. And so we had a set of criteria we thought was important on the school side. The town had some criteria that they wanted to include. And so after putting that criteria together and sifting through all of the communities in the state and basically sorting and coming up with the lists, this is the list of communities here. Some of them, have that the police and the fire thought it was particularly important, or DPW because of they had a 911 system, call system, or they had their more an equal amount of roads and sidewalks to clear. So when you look at the list, the vast majority, though, feel correct in terms of, they're high-performing school districts. We care about how we're doing in relation to those school districts. So before I go into the results themselves, just to give you a refresher on achievement versus growth. So achievement is how you do on a benchmark that is set by, with a cut point, and saying, if you get a certain score on the test, you will be considered proficient, or you will be approaching proficient. If you don't make that score, those are achievement levels, and there's 4 levels to the exam. So it's that is the sort of the cut point piece. And then the state created several years ago, maybe over a decade at this point, what they call a growth score, because they recognize the fact that communities and their test scores will be driven to some degree by the demographic of the community. It's well-known fact that if students' first language is not English and they're an ELL student, while they're learning English, their test scores are going to be lower. Kids who are coming from impoverished school backgrounds come in with less vocabulary. They have, their scores will historically have been lower, special needs students. And so what the growth score does is it's like a regression analysis for those who know statistics. It sort of factors out those backgrounds so that you can say a community that, how did our students do compared to other students throughout the state that had the same test score profile for the last two years? And so then it says, so compared to those students, how did our students grow compared to other students based on not achievement, but like a continual scale of scores? So it's what they call the scaled score. Anyhow, so achievement and growth are 2 different measures, and part of the reason for showing this to you, well, I talked through this piece already, this slide, which just goes into the high need students. But part of the reason I'm showing this to you is so that then you can look at the demographics of our students. There's some, compared to our benchmark districts, and there are some areas where we're relatively high, like we have a high number of ELLs compared to a lot of the benchmark communities. We're up towards the top with 11%, and then down towards the bottom you have 1% and 2% and 3% school systems. Economic, so the percent that are economically disadvantaged, again, we're up towards the top. We are not anything like the urban systems where they can have 60 or 70 or 80% students in poverty, but we're up at about 16%, and puts us in the top third of the scale there. And then the other category that's used to when the DESE is defining high needs category, they look at special needs students, and in this category, we're relatively low, so we're in the bottom third here, where some of the school districts have over 15%, up towards 20, 22, 23. We're down at 15%. So that just gives you a sense of the demographics of our community. So let me go into the scores themselves. I'm going to go by subject area, and I'm going to talk first about English language arts, and basically I'm going to give you the summary points, and then you can see some of the graphs to look at it. But this is the general finding here for English language arts, grade 3 through 8. Compared to the state, our students scored 66% of them scored in the proficient range. That's and then at the state level, it were 23 percentage points higher. So we're much higher than the state average. We're ranked in the top 10% of all school districts in the ELA in grades 3 through 8. So that means that our students are, doing exceedingly well. We're used to being up in the top 10%. And then when you look to the benchmark districts on the two different measures, ranked by growth, we're on second in terms of out of the 15 communities that are there, and 8th on achievement. And so an important point that gets a lot of attention these days is what about COVID and COVID recovery, and how are we compared to where we were prior to COVID? And we are not fully caught up, but we have not lost our standing in terms of our relative position to other districts and our benchmark districts. So this graph here, the first one that I'm showing you, basically you can see the blue line and the black line. The blue line is, or turquoise line is our school district over time, and then the black is the state average. And you can see they're kind of mirror images of one another. They start out in 2018 and 19, that's pre-COVID. That we were separated by 20 odd percentage points, and then everybody went down by some percentage points. You don't have 2020 there because we weren't in school, we couldn't test. So you basically have this dip that happens, and that's post-COVID dip, and there's a flattening out that you see now. And if you look at the blue, we were basically at 76% in 2018. We're scoring proficient or above. We're now at 66%, so it's a 10 percentage point drop. A way to think of that is those about 1,700 students are tested between grades 3 through 8. 10% of those is 170 students. Those 170 students, instead of being in proficient, have moved down, so the vast majority of our students are still scoring proficient, but there's about 170 students who would have scored proficient before that in that cohort that are now down in, over on the right, you can see the gray bars, and this is like our district over time, and basically there's the blue and the light blue, and then there's the gray and the red. And so the red is not meeting the standard at all, so basically failing. The gray is partially meeting. And you can see when we talk about the 10% moving down into that area, most of them are in the gray. The red area has gone from 4% to about 7 or 8%. So it's definitely an increase, but the vast majority of our students are still partially meeting or exceeding and meeting standards. So that is how you basically read this particular graphic, and I'm going to show you similar ones for the different subjects, and I won't spend as much time on them just in the interest of, you can slow me down at any point, but you get, I just wanted you to make sure to understand the layout here. The other one that I'm going to show a few times here is this is the scale score compared on the y-axis, which is basically the raw score in terms of how a student score versus the SGP, which is the growth score. And you want to be high on scale score, high on growth. That's the ideal place to be. And so you would be off in the far, right-hand quadrant of here. That would be the maximal. So you can see like Southborough and this particular, graphic, they're the highest up and the furthest out to the right. But we're right in the mix with, this is like a intense clustering of the 15 school districts. Some of them stand out as outliers, but we're basically right in the mix. Particularly our growth score, as I pointed out, we're like third in growth, eighth in achievement. So that's how you read this. You better get a read on both. And then you can go back and you can look at the demographics to see, again, the scale scores are going to be higher in communities that have fewer students who are high needs. So the scale scores, let me say it again, are going to be by definition, almost by research, by basically what we know about students, the scale scores tend to be lower for districts that have higher need students. So our ELA 10th grade scores, and you're going to see this pattern for our high school, and it's a great one that I want to make sure to emphasize here tonight, is compared to the state, again, we're much higher. We're at 88% proficient on the 10th grade test, 30 percentage points higher than the state average. We're ranked not in the top 10%, but in the top 4%. Okay, so this is at our high school level, our kids are performing in the top 4% compared to other 10th graders throughout the state. And then compared to our benchmark districts, we're ranked 7th on growth and 3rd on achievement. And the other piece here that I want to make sure is emphasized is this: we're scoring above our pre-COVID levels at the high school.
So the 10th grade did really well.
The 10th grade did really well, and this is how the graph looks here. As you can see, how we basically went from, it's not a huge uptick, but nevertheless, it's impressive that it didn't go down. It was 84% were proficient in 2019. We're up at 88%. So it's 4 percentage points higher than pre-COVID. Also for context, these 10th graders missed the second half of their 7th grade year for COVID, and then their 8th grade year was that, very unusual, so it was unusual in the spring and also the following year in terms of, so their 7th and 8th grade years were the ones when they were particularly disrupted.
It feels good to see the recovery window with strong instruction and kids springing back. And we've always used 10th grade as kind of the most important benchmark where you need to see it coming together for kids in terms of their performance. I think 3rd through 8th, where you have at those lower ages, the early skill development, it takes longer to close those gaps. But I think we're seeing the kind of progress we want, and our benchmarking really against our other communities continues to make us feel like we're really heading in the right direction.
So I'm going to move on to, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. The math scores. Math scores, very similar pattern. 3rd through 8th and 10th, you're going to see very similar. So 68% scored proficient. That's 27 percentage points above the state average. We're in the top 10%, just like we were for ELA. We're ranked 3rd on growth, 10th on achievement compared to our benchmark districts. We're not fully caught up. And, here's what the line chart looks like. And you can see the 2018 scores on the left there, and to the 2023 in the bar charts, and it's basically it's not quite 10 points. It's a 8-point differential, I think, between 5, 6, 7, 8 8-point differential between 2018 and 2023 in terms of the drop, 8 percentage points lower in the top 2 categories. So the bottom, the gray and red, expanded a bit. And then you can look at this next one and see our scaled scores and the achievement and where we fell in there. Moving over to grade 10 math scores, 87% scored proficient, 38% percentage points higher than the state, again, ranked in the top 4% of all school district, ranked 7th on growth compared to our benchmark districts, 4th on achievement, and scoring above are pre-COVID in terms of percent proficient. So you can see again the line chart here with the upward tick. I'm going to shift over to science, which is measured differently, and because it's only tested at 3 grade levels, 5, 8, and 10. They do not do a growth measure because you don't have like a prior year's test or a couple of prior years. So there's no growth measure. It's just a achievement score. And our science scores are very solid. 84% scored for proficient in grade 10, 38 percentage points above the state. Grade 8, 72% scored efficient, 32 percentage points above the state. Grade 5, 66% proficient, 32% above the state. And then compared to our benchmarks, we're second in grade 10, fifth in grade 8. Fifth in grade 8 and ninth in grade 5 relative to our benchmarks. And then compared to COVID, our grade 5 scores are at pre-COVID levels. So there isn't that kind of a dip that we haven't recovered from. The 8th grade scores are slightly below, and the 10th grade scores we don't have pre-COVID measure for because they changed the scale on the test. They basically, and changed the exam, they re-normed it. So here's a 5th grade snapshot, and then the 8th grade snapshot, and then there's just the 10th grade with 2 measures, both post-COVID. So, in a nutshell, we are performing well above the state average and on par with our benchmark districts in all subject areas. We are, very proud of our high school in terms of the performance and that they're, doing better than they were before COVID. And, we plan to continue to work with kids who are still not, recovered from COVID. That 170 that I was telling you about, we use assessment data to look at kids who are not performing. We not only MCAS, but other in-house assessments that we have to see how they're doing. And if they're not at grade level, we have a variety of interventions that we use. Some of it's in the classroom with the core classroom teachers, but we also have what we have Math Plus tutors that give essentially during the school day, they provide intervention. They're specialists in math, and they provide intervention for students who are scoring below grade level in math. We have reading specialists in our K-6 schools. They pull students and work with them, or they push into the classroom and work with them. And so there's like efforts that are going on all the time to try to, help the kids that are struggling. And our district, I believe, is doing a very good job at it. But as you can see, like compared to the state, everybody sort of, it's hard to make up for losing that much academic time. And we're hopeful that by the time the kids get to the high school, they will be doing as well as their peers are now. But that's the picture. So I know I went kind of quick, but there was a lot there, and you guys can look at the particulars in your own time, but you can also feel free to ask me any questions you have at this point.
Thank you. Yep. Questions?
So I have a few questions.
Yep.
One of them being that, could you tell us about any research that's been done? Obviously, I imagine there's quite a bit of ongoing research on what the effects of COVID have been on those lower grades. Amber touched on how, generally speaking, it would take longer to fill that gap essentially for them. So I'm just trying to understand what we're looking at in terms of the trajectory for that, because, the 10th graders that are performing well were in, a different grade when they were impacted by COVID. So I would like to understand more in depth as to what the research is saying regarding that.
Well, What it's showing is that the kids that were most impacted in our data is the same. If you subset it, again, I'm going to refer to demographics. The vast majority of the 170 kids are kids who fall into the high needs category. And the other kids, are performing at grade level and haven't dropped. And so if I subsetted the data and presented to you by those kids that had really fallen down, it's kids that didn't have the support structure at home that some other students had, or they have some learning disabilities where their parents don't have the skills to be able to support them at home. So I'm not sure if that gets exactly what you're talking about in terms of catching them up. I mean, some of it is for those students, it's intervention. It's what we call double dipping in terms of time. It's like we target the core, like for us in the elementary years, it's numeracy and literacy that are the most important areas to make up. And so we will give them double doses of numeracy and literacy to try to help make up the gap.
So you're saying that a vast majority of the students that were impacted and are is now coming through on these results is related to high needs. So there is, as far as you know, no correlation between the material at the age at which it's presented and that having been missed versus, I mean, are you saying that it's pretty much all the special needs kids that are impacting the scores?
No. I mean, there's high
needs, my apologies.
Yeah, high needs. So ELL students and students coming from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And again, if you think of the 170 number, let's play that out over several grade levels. So, divided by how many grade levels there are, we're talking like it's not large numbers per grade level. I mean, they add up. It's not trivial 170 students that are in a lower category, but those 170 are spread out among our grades 3rd through 8.
Okay. The other quick question I had was I'm trying to also understand the benchmark towns. I know I was not here for that. What year were those towns determined?
I think it's been 5 years now. I know.
Might have been older than that.
Yeah, I know it was.
where
It
they
was
came
right
from.
when it was started with Jim Malloy and then finished by Christie. So it was right at her trajectory. I think it's 5 years.
It was right when I came on the school committee, so it must be 5, almost 6
Yeah,
years.
and there's a current discussion.
Been using comparative communities for a long time, but the issue between other departments and the school committee were we were using schools that we felt were comparable. Meanwhile, as was mentioned in the summary, the other departments in town, like DPW, police department, fire department, felt that our choice, if you will, for our comparables wasn't fair to them. And so the driver to create this list actually came from the finance committee to be able to say, how do we compare financially relative to taxes, et cetera, based on this comparison of other towns.
So my thought on that, and I guess it's a question also, I mean, if this was done 5 years ago, I'm not sure how much this needs to be re-examined again to reassess the applicability of the towns. And also, I personally would feel that we should have our own metric as far as the schools are concerned, because separate from what the town's benchmarks are, just because, I mean, the factors are so different. And I would also think that it would be good for us to have some reach schools or schools that we're trying to look at as exemplary and what we're striving towards just for our own, checks. That would be.
Sure. Two things. I think, one, I know FinCom has asked to look back, to reassess the list, and they want to just consider an update, and we said, sure. I think Christie's looking at that. You can jump on the committee with us. It was a really interesting and intellectual and kind of fun process that we did before to try to come to a compromise on the schools. There's nothing that says that you couldn't request for Daniel to sort his MCAS data using the list of schools that he used to use. there are schools that we've always traditionally, applied to. When we do our budget presentations, we need to be in compliance with the goals of the town, that we keep that comparative list. MCAS, if you want Daniel to select another set and revert to the original list we used, he could do so for the MCAS because it's an assessment. We don't bring our MCAS. We can sort it both ways. It's certainly a discussion we're willing to have. We serve at your pleasure, and if you want to see the data done differently, then that's the purpose of his report. We've tried to be in a place of consistency over the years, and I know when Daniel looks at the data, he tends to still skim through comparative schools that, we benchmark against. There's a healthy dose on that list that are strong comparison schools for us. I mean, certainly Lexington is, they benchmark 1 all the time. Hopkinton is certainly comparable. If you go back to the list, I mean, I think you can pick and choose. I don't want to not call out other communities. I don't think that's appropriate. But, there's a good number of those that are appropriate benchmarks for us. Sharon has a very similar size community, an L community, and interestingly, town benchmarks that were very similar. I remember, being surprised by that. Southborough is certainly one we've always looked at, but up for discussion. And so we have between now and next year's report, and if you want Daniel to give you a bar graph of selective communities of interest, we can always do that. It's pretty easy to pull that up.
Can I just make one comment about that too? Is that, when I first came on the school committee, this was a new thing, to have these set towns to compare scores to. And what I had heard is that by the schools choosing their own towns to compare to, we're cherry picking and making ourselves look good to try and convince the town that their money is well spent in the schools, and look how high our scores are, look how good our students are doing. And it was the accusation that we chose the towns to compare ourselves to, so we look really good. And you could never compete with Wellesley because our budget isn't the same. So, you know what I mean? It's and then once we did this, and so fire, police, everyone, all the towns, and we're part of these benchmark communities was their budget, looking at how much money they have to spend with schools, with their town municipal groups. Our scores still come out really good. So the idea is that you're getting a very high quality value for what you're spending here in town. So that was part of.
Yeah, and part of the reason for me presenting the data too compared to the state is it's the whole shooting match.
Yeah.
So when I say we're in the top 10%, there's 350 school districts. That puts us one of 35, right? And that, and that sort of, which is when you see the ratings that come out from various, right, rating niche and U.S. News and World Report and the Boston Magazine, we tend to be within the top 35. So that's and that, so anyhow, that gets rid of the cherry picking argument too, is how are we doing compared to the whole?
Well, I would suppose that would also depend on what the metric is that was being used to select the schools. I don't know if it was just geographic, the original model that was used. It was clearly there's a different metric being used now, right? I did notice there's no reference to taxes. I thought that's interesting. I don't know if that falls under financial benchmarks, perhaps?
Well, it's the driver behind this list is what the Finance Committee was using to judge whether our budget made sense.
Yeah, any town, when our town manager does any presentation, you will see the benchmark communities and where we are in terms of how much we pay for taxes, and we are not at the top.
Yeah, but
I can pull the
let's go
report
back
too,
one
because
step.
they wrote a nice.
Let me say this,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry.
Going back one step from here is we can make any comparison of ourselves as a school to anywhere else in the Commonwealth. A list like this is not important for us to make that comparison. If we're doing very well for our students and our students perform when they move on outside the community to college or otherwise, we've done our job. This list and the comparison on this list is to take it to the town meeting to get the money that we want to have our system perform that well. So this list is not important. It's only important across the street when they decide whether they want to support our budget or not. So the issue here is, do we believe that our students do well in comparison to any town? You know, that's really the bottom line. And in fact, you know, how we deal with it, the quality of the teachers who teach here, all of those things are our judgment call. I think this is, you know, a comparison that has a basis for different reasons than quality education. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I can pull the report, is what I was gonna say. I mean, they did, at the time that they did it, I'll find the report and I'll send it to you guys, which was a summary, again, that just talked about what selective, I mean, Daniel outlined it to you, that's not the full package of what they did, and we spent months looking at different towns and giant spreadsheets and, you know, going through how we would come to a relative. And there were towns that kind of came in and off, on and off the list, that were kind of on the cusp, and we wanted to, you know, control the number. And so FinCom's interested in looking at it again, and I think Christie's discussing it, and, you know, I think we'll see. If I said if they want to look at it, we'll come to the committee meeting and participate as we did before. But I'll pull the report and see if I can find it, and I think Christie must have it, and I'll share it with you guys just as a point of information.
Yeah, so I agree, and actually one point, that was sort of what I was trying to understand also, is the impact of this. I mean, on the presentation, it's there, but I don't get too excited about the comparisons to these benchmark districts, the way that it's laid out. I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong then, the assessment really should be the achievement piece, but more so even the growth piece, because we're able to assess how our students are performing from a growth perspective, and I feel that that's a good assessment of, you know, the work that's being done.
Yeah, I think that's right, though, at the high school level where so many are scoring up towards the top of the scale, growth no longer, like, it's hard, you sort of hit a ceiling. So, but yes, I mean, the growth is very important.
One of the things that was unique about this list is that, you know, we have a tax rate, and of course, that's the first comparison. What's our tax rate as compared to anybody else on the list? What we found out when we dug into it, there was a town on the North Shore whose tax rate was approximately half of ours. But they do that. They had an equal number of students, they had this and they had that. Well, our assessments in terms of the value of the real estate here were relatively low based on our cost versus a town on the North Shore whose let's call it residences, had a tax assessment that was 3 times ours. That was the shift. So that's why this thing here, from the perspective of education, isn't necessarily good or bad. It's just uses a metric across the street. But I do think when you can find a true comparison of the performance of our kids when they go forward and leave the school system versus any of the other towns, that's the real measure. And I think that's what you're trying to get at. So I don't know how we do that. We've been trying for a long time. But anyway.
Complex.
Yeah, but it's helpful, even as it stands, for our comparison, for our discussion at town meeting relative to our budget. It's interesting that there was an article this morning on Good Morning America in regards to the super performance of the state of Mississippi in education versus what they had been. Unfortunately, I didn't get it all, and I'd be very interested to see what you guys could dig out of that, because what they were touting was a brand new teaching method between what they were and what they're doing. So that was good.
Yeah. Mississippi is a state that has a lot of room for growth, so it's good that they're making progress.
Yeah.
I mean, we still, in Massachusetts, score on the NAEP test #1 on number of dimensions as a state compared to other states.
Okay, we good?
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So just back to the growth versus achievement.
Yep.
I did notice in all of those slides, I compare both. The higher the achievement, the lower the growth, and vice versa. So is that what you were saying earlier, that if you're closer to the top, there is less room for growth?
Yeah, it's harder to, a lot of the districts, their students are doing so well that the room for growth is, sort of tightens up.
I mean, I don't have any reason to be concerned, but I'm just trying to understand if I understand
Yeah.
Yeah.
that correlation correctly.
Yeah, but it's not an exact. I mean, there are plenty of good districts. I mean, basically the state average is 50. It's set by the state, like they norm it. And if you're doing better than 50 on the growth score, you're outperforming the state average. And we sort of look at that metric and take. We do it by grade. We teachers look at their scores. We get feedback that we can use that's useful. But yeah. If you scored really well and you're being compared to other students that are scored really well, and there's not room for growth, then there's
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. I also noticed in the both ELA and math for the 3rd to 8th grade, the number of not meeting the expectations is growing. I mean, by a small number, but it's growing. But also the number of exceeding expectations is recovering after COVID. It's also going up, at least 2 years for ELA, and I think 3 years for, 3 different MCAS years for math.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, do I understand correctly that we have a growing number of students that are struggling and that can be attributed to the L's, to the special needs, and then the growing number of exceeding expectations means that we are recovering? Is that the proper interpretation?
Good question.
Yes. There are kids that just did fine and are doing fine and are basically at the same level they would have been because they were able to make it up with support structures that they had.
So is there I'm happy with the blue numbers.
Yeah.
It looks good. For the red numbers, for the non-meeting expectations.
Yep.
Is there some kind of a red flag, a number that would cause? I mean, have any of these results caused you to reflect on a need to change anything, or you think we're doing well and we can continue the way it's been going?
Like I was saying before, that we just are more careful with the assessments. We make sure that we're doing more frequent assessments, that we give students who need the extra support that they need to get. That's it.
The last question I have is, historically, do we do better in the grade 10 result versus the 3rd to 8th?
Yes.
Overall, yeah, I mean, it's cumulative work over time. Although, I mean, again, you can see strange dips, but typically I think if we went back and looked at our data over 10 years,
Yeah. I would also say the incentive structure, when you get to high school, you're not going to be able to get your diploma unless you pass the test. And high school brains sort of kick into gear a little bit in terms of like, oh, this is something I should really do and pay attention to. I mean, there are students that you'll see that, I don't know about you, Amber, but I watched my 3 kids that went through and their MCAS scores would go up and down because, they're just like in elementary school or middle school, they're like, didn't really care sometimes. I mean, but in high school.
Also a function of the throughput, if you will. I mean, one of the things we discussed in a previous meeting was not only the total count in the school system, but how long a given student has been in the school system.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think when you get to maybe 8th grade and older, that families stay here in order to have their kids graduate. Which I think is a different metric than what you're
Right. I think that's an interesting insight. I mean, again, you're not looking at a clean trajectory. When you see like we had over 500 students come and go, and then 250 new last year, those students are coming in at all certain benchmarks, and we haven't gotten to own the trajectory of that instruction. Plus you have for students, to Sarah's point, that missed the last half of kindergarten and hybrid through the vast majority of first grade. There's just no way that a hybrid instruction is good for a 6-year-old. Instructionally, they don't have the attention span for that, even with parents working to be diligent. You just can't get the same amount of intense practice. So they're now second grade. Last year, they had, a decent year, but it was still kind of feeling odd, and then they're third graders this year. So we'll see how this grade tests. But the group that is in second grade this year, like we've had teachers that would say, okay, this is my first class that has been in school. And so they have their own kind of benchmark in their mind where they feel like they should start to see similar numbers again, because everyone is kind of like getting back into that, like what you have to get done each year in order to pull the kids, effectively through the learning curve. So it's going to be interesting to watch the data. I mean, statistically, it's an interesting time. No one's ever lived through this before. I mean, they didn't do data the way they did when you had, other massive pandemics in, the 1800s. Like, you just didn't, this is a first of a lifetime. So I think that your decisions and support budgetarily to keep class sizes small has allowed us to provide more intensive small group instruction in classes. And I think that heading into year 3, the phonological work intensifying, I think we should start to see I think our third grade numbers are going to be worth watching. So, statistically, I mean, if you look at data, we like data, so it's enjoyable to watch. And then at a teacher level, they literally watch it by kid. So it's different, like you can understand the data very differently when you're looking at the individual child. I'm overall pleased with the progression we're making and the recovery of where things look. We'd like to get back above that pre-COVID level as quickly as possible. So that's a very robust discussion to have when you have several more presentations to get through. Can you hang in there? Any other questions for Daniel before we finish tonight? You can follow up with him too later. This isn't like a one and done. You can ask him more as we progress.
One thing I didn't mention, I'll say very quickly, you didn't ask me, I was waiting for it, but the teachers get reports on how their students did. But the reports, there's 3 different kinds. One is how do the students do just at this top level. The second is how do they do in terms of different discrete topic areas. So there's several different topic areas in the LA and science and English that are covered. Like in the English, it's reading, it's writing, it's grammar, it's expression. And so they get a report on that to see whether their pacing or a particular area of delivery needs to be improved. And then there's an item analysis report on every student that they could look at and see on a particular test item if the students in their class didn't do well. And then they can just helps them to reflect and grow as professionals. And so they always get those 3 reports every year in the fall. And part of the delay in getting to you in November is I prioritize getting those reports to them in October.
Yep.
And then there's the sharing of the results to all the parents, which is a huge lift and job to take care of at the district level. That doesn't come, I don't know if people know this, but it comes from your own district's office. The state isn't mailing those out.
Right.
So it's a big job. So, yeah.
Okay, moving on. School committee goals. The general discussion is about our goals that we created when we had our retreat with some other work since then. I don't know how you want to deal with these, just read them, I suppose?
Oh, I was just going to move to approve them.
Yeah. There you go.
I move to approve the school committee goals.
We've looked at these a lot. Let's just work on them.
Second that.
Okay, is there a discussion on the goals as they have now been created?
I would just say that we've all had a lot of time to look at them and think through them. And I'm very pleased with the new organizational structure that we put around them to have 3 big ideas: maintain academic excellence, governance, policy, and fiscal responsibility, and then communication. And I think this is a really strong set of goals for us this year.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. 500, thank you.
Great, we can work on them together.
And those will be posted on the website.
I like the clean start you brought to them. It was really worth the time and felt really good. Are you ready for, oh wait, let's see, what's next? I'm just,
He's
all right.
giving you the clicker.
Budget, woo-hoo, all right.
What part of the 24?
On the 50-yard.
Kelly's
Yeah,
finding
there
herself in the photo.
There it is. You're trying to find yourself in there.
What yard line are you on?
I think right on the 4.
So thank you, and I want to applaud your stamina. I know it's late, and it's hard to listen to a lot of talking. We can keep this interactive. You can ask me questions as Anita and I go. You don't need to wait till the end if that helps you kind of stay engaged and keep moving through it. You've done a great job tonight. It's a lot of listening for you. And so you remember that we begin, this is the next stage of the budget process. First stage was to have Daniel present you the general enrollment numbers and to confirm that we think we're on track to be able to maintain our overall enrollment numbers. He called out that you can anticipate seeing some staffing at the high school. And we are now in the phase that we have all of the directors and principals developing their budgets, and those will get turned in. In presentation 3, you'll see every request that was made of any department head and their budget requests in an overview. So the next budget presentation is substantial in that it will meld what you knew about enrollment, what you know about these numbers of these large cost centers, and then the requests at the building level and department level. And so the next budget presentation starts to kind of layer in that density. The goal is that you can go back to any of these presentations, kind of look at them, think them through, send questions, ask to sit down, all a process to build kind of that large number. So Anita is listening and she will weigh in as needed. There's a little lag for her from what she's watching, so it's hard for her to interact, but she has texted me that she is tracking where we are. So here we go with budget presentation number 2. Daniel, I gotta see if I can get it. I gotta see if I can hit. I don't know if I can get it to work. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to begin with a brief timeline because you have to remember people watching, we try to remember that this might be their first pass. So we try to give you a tight recap at the beginning of each budget presentation, hit the goals. I'm going to recap 24 because 25 is built off of 24. I'm going to talk about major cost centers where we can set some early numbers. I'm going to look at the contract with you so you can have some awareness around the contract impacts that will roll into that salary number. I'm going to give you a forecast on some of the special ed tuition and circuit breaker interaction. I'm going to hit on capital and then I'll take questions. And this is first grade artwork from, I think, Hastings.
Did you say first grade?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know. The artwork is beautiful. I shifted back to artwork this year. So I just want to give you a pacing, and again, if somebody's watching and wondering how we build the budget, it's November 1st, and we're looking at budget presentation 2, which is an overview of major cost centers. Then we'll find some time to work to meet with FinCom, should they want to sit down with us, and on the 15th, you'll get that next large budget presentation. The goal then is that we space it out a little bit more, and that you get the final larger presentation on the 29th, and then you get 2 weeks before you have to vote it again. So you've got time to learn more. We've got time to meet and talk with FinCom, and people can see the progression of how the budget comes to fruition. So when we're building the budget, I think it's important for people to understand, and I'll show this on the next slide when we get to slide 6. Our goal is to maintain the excellence of this district, the academic excellence, the fine arts, athletics, and all of the dimensions that make a quality student experience here in Westborough. We want to use a process that is grounded in respect and collaboration with our colleagues, with our district, with our teachers, with our department heads, and our principals. It involves lots of human capital, and it takes a lot of time, but that time is valuable towards everybody being invested in the final outcome. We're always trying to be strategic, trying to innovate, trying to think forward to things that might impact us, and we're trying to always lean in on cost-saving measures, leveraging funding to spread out costs over time, to be strategic in the way we bring that dollar forward. Oh, what's going on there, Daniel? There we go, slow. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to give you a tight remembrance of the FY24 budget, which we are now about 8 weeks into. When we develop budget, it's important to understand that we use a framework of not complete zero-based budgeting, because we have some standard costs that are known that increase by the percentages of those contracts and things. But when we're working each year, you can see by those percentages that the percentage of increase ends up being grounded in what the needs are that year. It's not like we're just building that number over and over again at a standard 4% every year, no matter what. Our budget varies based upon enrollment, curriculum needs, staffing needs, impacts of contract costs. And we're always working with the departments and the directors and Daniel and all those people and the principals to look at what they've had, to kind of start from that base and build what their needs are. You can see here that trajectory will hit harder on some years than others. And oftentimes, if you look at those, you can see that those are contract years or other types of things like that. So this is our current functioning budget. That is the Purple Heart coming from Hastings. You can see that this was a 4.1% increase over FY23, and that the base number is that $63,539,476. We got there by doing some cuts, by pushing things onto grants, and by doing some other leveraged changes. And you can see all those cost centers, and we will make comparisons as we go, but I give that to you as a benchmark so you don't have to go back in and kind of dig through the past presentations. Sorry. Okay. So you're looking at the early implementation of where we are with FY24, and we'll start giving you quarterly reports on kind of the progression of that expenditure rate and how we're doing in those different cost centers as the year progresses. Our goal tonight is to look at the major budget drivers where we can show you impact costs that we will have in the current plan for FY25. I'm going to look at transportation, I'm going to look at contracts and fixed costs, and I'm going to do some preliminary work with you on special education. You guys with me?
Yep.
Okay. We're in year 2 of the contract. So FY25 will be year 2. We just broke the cover on FY23-24, and it's the first year of our new contract. So the 4.1% covered the opening of year 1, and we'll be moving into year 2. And roughly the transitional percentages aren't that different. You will see that the teachers, if they are moving through the 12-step table and they've got room to step, there's a 3.8% step between each of those changes. And there's a 3% this year on top of steps 1 through 11. Step 12 has an additional 0.5 on it. That's because when you have a large percentage of our teachers who are at the top, they're not stepping with that 3.8%, They're just getting, they'll get just the COLA, the 3%. When you look at the other contracts, again, the teachers are the largest cost center for us, so that's just one for you to think about. The administration, that's a small group of administrators. That's the assistant principals, curriculum coordinators, and student service coordinators. And they do have a small step table. We negotiated that last year as well. And the COLA is 2.5 to 3, and the steps are much smaller in between, but they're working at larger base salaries. Custodian and food service, you can see where they ended up. Again, smaller steps between with a 3%. Tutors, very small unit, but really hardworking people for us. Paraeducators, we have a large number of paraeducators. There's no COLA there, it's just the step. It just makes it really clean when we're building that budget. You see the assistants at the building levels, and they have a step. If they're moving through steps, it's 3.5 increase, and then they got a 2.5. Unaligned are anybody else who have independent contracts, Daniel, me, different people across the district, the maintenance, different people that are out of contract. And they were hovering in those percentage ranges, and they don't have steps. So that is what Anita's working with right now. She's taking every employee we have in district, and she's taking them and she's stepping them and applying that with the COLA and getting to the hard exact number for the employees we currently have. Transportation. So we will be moving into year 5 of that 5-year contract. So next year is our last year. We will be putting out a bid next year. That's all work that's ahead of us. But for the FY25, Anita did some work on this, and you can see that the FY23% was 7.3. This year we carried the 3.7. She's looked at the numbers, she's looked at the escalations, and right now her recommendation to me is to carry 5.25%. Given that we're having a lot of issues with needing to then go outside of the contract because they haven't fulfilled vans, and the van costs for some of those things are much higher. So when she looks at the total package of transportation, her perspective was that she wants to run it at the 5.25% as of now in our early budgeting work. And you can see at the bottom, that's a total of $193,078. When you look at the category there, she's showing you the cost increases over the last 3 years. The total for transportation there is on the far right. And she gave you the breakout of what we pay for each of the major cost areas, which I think was really helpful. The other piece is that Assabet Valley Collaborative is going out to bid contract right now with Vanpool. We have no idea where that number is going to come in. It could come in very high. They're just not sure what that bid is going to look like. Now, I'm on the board and I'll keep us updated, but if you look at the mini buses, or if you look at it's part of regular in-town transportation, that $2 million number is picking up van transportation for the in-town loop. Preschoolers with complex needs who we do transport, and then any other students in district that require public transportation as part of their IEP. So there are students who are moving around district. The vast majority of our students are in district. The number we always look at then separately is the out-of-district number, and that number will be impacted by the contract at AVC. So you're looking at that $600,000 number, could be higher. So I think right now her calculation is smart. Any thoughts on or questions on transportation? In the past, after we build the whole budget and we're looking at everything, you know, there's years where we've come back and we've cut a percentage and, you know, hope that we'll be kind of in target range. We'll go back and look at those analytics more. We cut it back from where we thought it was going to be last year. When you look at, we carried it at 3%. So as we look at that cost this year, The problem is when you're budgeting, you don't get to see like how it all plays out. And then you're trying to, like maybe that was a smart decision. But we could also then end up finding cost escalations there, and I think we decided last year in bringing that number in and wanting to hit that, low fours, bringing that number down, we did decrease what we were carrying in transportation as an example.
One question or comment rather is that we also have to take into account that we may possibly be getting money back on the contract, on the current contract based on the failures of their obligations.
Exactly
depending
right.
on how that plays out. So, there could be some
Right, there's some
differential
washes there. Like right now, the cost of the additional vans and being, if we're using one of the other transport systems, the difference is $600 a day versus like $100 a day. Like the difference in contract rate is huge. So we would make, that would all be within the transportation line item and they'll wash each other out. But yes, we will see some savings as we have runs that don't go. And we've been clear in our demand letter and in our information that we will not pay them for runs that aren't complete. Oops, sorry. Now let's look at utilities. So these are the major cost centers. You can see, and I like the way Anita laid this out, and she and I spent a lot of time looking at it. You can see the expenditures in electricity. You see that in FY24, we did a 30% increase. That was the number that Leah applied to electricity in the fixed contract last year. That was $212,000 higher than the year before. And so this year, she's going to carry 5% increase for electricity, and we're going to try to keep it as tight as possible. I think that's, I don't know. Anita, if you can hear me, was that the number that Leah gave you? Or did she not have it yet?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
So the 5% for, I'm asking your questions for us. The 5% for electricity that you carried, was that the number that Leah gave you, or did you have to estimate because she hadn't had that number yet?
I'm so sorry, your voice is echoing, so I can't hear you properly.
That's
I
all right.
apologize.
That's okay. I'll find out. Typically, just to clarify, the electricity number contract is done by the town and we share in it. But they also are undergoing a transition. Leah was transitioning out. You have a new manager in. And I believe that I will confirm for you, but that the 5% came from Leah as the number that we need to carry. So year over year for electricity, we just take the percentage of the contract that she's got fixed. The others, we contract. So we carry the fuel contract, so she's plugged it in at the 5%. And trash varies. We try to get the estimate based upon use. So if you look at the trash removal, we carry a portion of all the composting, a good chunk of that 80 expended is carried in the Chartwell's account because it's all the food waste recomposting. So I think that the percentages are conservative, but again, I think we'd made some big jumps last year. So this increase is much more reasonable and a much better place at the 58,000 right now. Any questions on those? Again, these are contracts, it's a rate, we have to roll it in. And then you will have, your use varies, that's the thing. I mean, you can see big swings if it's a particularly cold year, or it just really, you're really trying to be responsive. But there's been years where that number has really swung wildly, that, based upon weather and estimates. And so again, we will be able to do some offsets, hopefully, as we get our budgeting cycle developed, where that money that comes back from fails can be used to push against those increases or overages, so they won't impact us. Thank you, Steve Durrett. So the other major cost area that you need to know those hard numbers as we start to build the budget is going to be special education. We've talked about transportation. I want to continue to note, when you looked at some of our higher performing districts that we compare against, they have special education numbers up in the 20%, 23% at the highest rate. We really have a strong special education department. We have 15% of our students currently, which is the state average, just a little under the state average, receiving special ed services. Their programming remains very robust. We add a lot of staff because it requires it, but I continue to feel that our overall programming is responsive to the students that are coming in. Tonight, we're going to look at, and you always have that new students, which is the big unknown, but I just call it out for people watching, you know it well. The number we're going to look at tonight is the out-of-district tuitions. So currently, out-of-district costs as we budgeted, not her whole budget, but out-of-district costs for us for tuition for FY24 are running at that $3,896,000 number. And the circuit breaker in 24 was the $1,860,000. Currently, we're anticipating that the costs for out-of-district are going to run at the $4 million number, the 257. That's carrying, that's time to be done. That number is a strong number. I just want to give a shout out to the special education department. They've literally got it in an elaborate spreadsheet. Students that are aging out, that will drop out, students coming in, changes to tuition costs, changes in location. I mean, really, the department does an amazing job. So I feel like that number is on point. You can see we got about a $216,000 increase to circuit breaker. And the total cost differential there, when you pull out circuit breaker, there's the tuition costs that we're looking at. So from last year to this year, you've got $144,000. I won't call it a gap right now, but it's just a number that is an increase as of now, and we'll see where it falls when Sherry does her whole budget. So right now, as she does all of her budgeting, the number is, what number did she carry for other costs and where are those offsets gonna be? And I think her budget, I anticipate is gonna come in pretty well. We might be able to neutralize that cost with other shifts she makes in her numbers. So we will see, but right now, if you just look at on the face value of circuit breaker that we have and out-of-district costs, there's $144,795 more than last year. And I think we'll have ways to do some offsets in that. You can't really figure out how all those numbers are at play until you see her full budget. But I think you really want to know that circuit breaker number and understand how much we're going to have to pay for and those are fixed right now. So what you see in those two numbers, the $4,257,000 is a fixed number. You're going to see that carried forward from tonight, and the circuit breaker number carried forward from tonight. And then we're going to be working to do as much offsetting as we can. I'm getting nervous. Looks like Steve's checking his math. So checking my math. I'm going to leave that slide up since he's running a calculation.
I mean, basically, that's only a 7% increase, and we took a hit last year by virtue of state contracts being, astronomical.
Insane, right?
And so, yeah, maybe that might disappear.
Yeah, no, I think that, Sherry's being strategic. We're looking at grants. I feel like, that's the work that's the big work that comes after we get these numbers plugged in. So, it's the puzzle pieces start to come together, and it's just good for you to see these numbers that we'll be carrying. I'm just going to call out as well, technology. John, we spent a long meeting with John the other day. John's current FY24 budget is the $889. And we gave him an increase last year. He had seen a lot of increased costs. He's anticipating he needs between an 8 and 10% increase upcoming in his current budget. That right now, if you run that number, is like $109,000. So I put that in there. Right now I know that's like that hard number I'm kind of carrying in my head. I'd rather running at 10% in my head right now. So when I met with him and when Anita and I met with him, we were looking at a base of like 110,000 increase for him, just for all the contracts we're covering, the new website, Parent Square, like all that stuff's just, that level of service costs money, and we can work to manage it. But I think we will do an in-depth presentation on his increases and what they are. That's what's coming on the 15th. But for me, I start kind of pulling those rough numbers, ones I know are fixed that won't change and ones that might, and then we're kind of having the beginning discussions on that, and you'll see all those iterations. We share those with you. Sorry.
I have one question. On the blue category of that slide, how much of an annual replacement, percent-wise, does that represent in terms of hardware? In other words, whatever we spend, but,
Right.
Do we have a cycle period?
He has a very clear cycle for each of the different, he has a cycle for Chromebooks, he has a cycle for iPads, he has a cycle for Macs, and he has a cycle for his Dells. And he rotates them through stages of life. And for example, like when the iPads are aged, they move for uses in classrooms as a standing center. When they age out of that, he takes them and he has a buyout contract to get back whatever value he can on them and rotates that back into his carried costs. I think he has a 5-year cycle, but I can check, and when we do the slide report, I'll add it for you, Steve. There's been years when he thought he would need like a 6-year cycle on iPads, and he pushed them a year further because they were still functioning. He carries a certain amount in that number for repair costs. You've got, 4,000 students touching devices 7 days a week, and I think he carries $20,000 in repair costs. The vast majority of that is Gibbons. There's something about 7th and 8th graders.
What I'm trying to get at is whether its material cost increase on the same number of units, that is the difference between the 449 and the 557.
Yeah.
Or whether we decided to kind of cheat a little bit, not buy as many, and therefore the increase isn't just the 9%, but it's more than that because we're not replacing the hardware in that cycle.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and he plays with both of those. If I said to him, sorry, I don't have this, he'll come back and he'll say, then I can push this out a year, I can cut this. Like he'll come and be happy to present kind of that detail, but I'll pull some of that detail into the slides we present on the technology, and I'll fold those answers in. Because he gives us, I think some years, you're right, like he'll decide to purchase fewer items and then rotate out one more year because there's other hardware costs that he wants to increase, and he just plays with it.
Yeah, my real concern in that question isn't that the dollar difference between last year and this year if we're buying the same number of hardware, but if we're trying to limit the increase by buying fewer, then the real
It'll catch
hit
us.
comes next year.
Right, no, that's right. So he tends to, and again, I meet with him weekly and we have these discussions. The rotation will be, for example, and he clusters it by the types of devices he needs. So he has a cycle he can delay, like for example, he's in the middle of smartboard replacement. So that is a reasonable delay over laptops, which are high performance output. So he would probably say, I'm going to slow the implementation. If money became an issue of discussion, he would slow the implementation on the rollover of those smart boards, which becomes an equity issue because you've got them in olive fails and you're trying to get the other schools up to a benchmark. But he would probably select that, and he already told me this. He's like, I could slow the infusion of those by a year if I had to keep the hardware moving at the building level if he has to. So, he's amazingly astute at this work and tracks it and gets a lot of his money's worth from negotiating. He's a very, very intense negotiator and pushes on costs at a high level, and he does well. So he'll develop slides. We'll pull these questions. I'll give him the ones that you're asking just because he can enhance the content he gives me for the slides on technology. But again, it's the lifeblood of this, it's a circulatory system of the district. He's in the middle of rotating, and you get his report in the spring, and he called out this increase when he came in the spring with his report to you. He's in the middle of rotational replacement of Wi-Fi by building too. So those hubs, and we've known each other, he and I now 10 years, and he's looking at the rotational replacement of those. And we're having Wi-Fi trouble at the high school, which is not a place you can have Wi-Fi trouble. I know Hallie could probably tell you it's problematic. So that's up for replacement this summer. So he's actually doing proof of concept on Wi-Fi like he did it at the office. So we could see that, and then he's gonna do those hub purchases. Those will rotate, and I think it's like $58,000 for just the high school replacement. So, it's a very dynamic budget and purchase cycle, and, he loves talking about it, and he'd be happy to answer any questions. Just to recap on enrollment, I indicated that, I continue to feel like the fact that we kept class sizes reasonable when we came out of COVID and we held that low number is covering us now. But we are seeing a trend in new housing units that I just need to call out, and we're going to have to track it. I just got an update that they're gonna do 18 micro homes over on my side of town, which are single, small unit, 1-bedroom houses. They're hoping it won't be families, but, we can't be sure. And then there's a 19 apartment complex unit also that's like a 4-story apartment complex unit, all gonna go over by the TOV. Both of those are coming to fruition at different timeframes and paces, but at some point that enrollment, the apartment 19 units will definitely hit us. You also have, I think, 18 units coming in over off of the development that's over on the edge of Grafton. That's gonna come into the cycle, and I think there's another 15 houses being built that need to come off of the, which one is that, Steve? The one that they're, off of Mount Pleasant, that development. So we see housing developing. There's two houses being proposed on my street currently. Instead of one, they're gonna put 2 in. So you're seeing a housing growth. We're just gonna have to track it. I think we can absorb it. But you combine that with the newcomers, we have 38 students. That's like a small apartment complex when you get 38 students that come into your district like that. So right now, I feel like we're absorbing that impact, but this is a year we're tracking that's gonna continue to be something that we have to keep talking about. I believe that the most essential increases you're gonna see are probably gonna be small numbers, but some additional staffing at the high school. I'm gonna stop there and just say to you, that's the base on the large cost centers that I'm carrying right now, working with Anita. I'd like to take a minute and talk about capital projects. Do you have any other questions around budget or anything? Again, this is all just absorbing information. Yep.
Just one question. I want to make sure I understand everything correctly. So the transportation is going up by 193, utilities 58, special education 144. That's total a little under 400,000. So that's compared to the last year's budget. That's less than half. That's a little over 0.5%.
Yeah, it's 0.77%. So all the numbers I gave you tonight, although I carried John's number a little lower, it's under 500. It's hitting around 500,000. It's the 193, the 58.5, the 144, and then John's number, it's about 0.8%. So all of those, if all of that stuff rolls in, the fixed costs that have to be there, and John's is a fluid number that we can manipulate a little bit, but the other contracts aren't, that's less than 1%, you're right. So you're trying to look at those, and then the salary number comes in, and you're trying to use your revolvings and your grants. We carry about $7,000 of additional budget money that's grants and revolving accounts and tuitions. So, your all-in budget is close to 70 million by the time you look at those other offsets in the total package of budgeting. So there's interplay there that we're using at all times to bring in an advantageous, budget that is responsive but lets us maintain excellence. Other questions? That was a good question. Anything else? Let me just highlight the capital. Kelly is working feverishly on several changes to capital based upon the report that came in. She will come and report to you, and we'll build that into budget discussion. It'll be in front of the timeline for the deadlines where, and Yakub, you just rotated onto that committee, the capital committee. So, you'll get up to speed there, and maybe Kelly and I can meet with you and kind of go through some of that with you. I mean, obviously Steve can explain it all to you, but whatever overlay you need, I'd be happy to do that. The budget sheet deadlines for that are coming due, and there's a timeline. And Kelly's making some adjustments based upon the new report we got. She also went back to them, and she has them coming on site to give her more detail on the bathrooms at the high school. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute. So she's adjusting the capital timelines, but in terms of FY25 and what we will be bringing to town meeting, those are already decided in terms of preliminary discussions, and I'll just highlight those to you. We have the Mill Pond restoration. The design dollars were voted and it's currently in design. It will go out to bid and we will have a hard fixed number that we will carry to town meeting. It is a rough order of magnitude at the 1.1 million now, and we will be there with bid in hand for the application of that funding at town meeting. And remember, that's the restoration where it gives us 25 more years on that roof. It's not a full strip it off and put on a new roof. It's the restoration process. Hastings, we will have the bid opened with a hard number for the ADA requirements and the MABB project, which is basically to bring the building up to compliance so we can get out of the cycle we're in where we can't do work because it keeps tipping the percentage marker. And we will be in front of town meeting seeking the design dollars for the roof of the high school. And there's 3 pieces to that because packaging that all together will give us the most advantageous contract opportunity. And remember, the capital committee, working with Steve and Ian and that whole group, came to a structure that's workable, which is we go for design, and then when that's voted, that next number's coming because we'll have a bid. So this is like the other 2 are bids. We'll be at town meeting with those opened, and this is a tier of design. This is all going to go back through process at the capital committee, and it will get thumbs up or thumbs down based upon any changes of what's going on there. And we will be going to present staying on track with these plans. 2 of the things that, I'm just going to move it to this favorite slide. Look at that. Those are Gibbons stitch dolls that they do in the fall, and I love them. They're little. They're so cute. So while you gaze at those, we can have some discussion. The capital, there's 2 items that need to come into rotation based upon adjustments from that larger report, and where they fall and how that impacts us will be discussed. One is to do a playground upgrade at Hastings so that all 3 elementary playgrounds have appropriate play surface and upgrade. She'll carry that forward as one of the discussions, and where it falls will be determined, and we'll discuss that with you guys as well. The other is looking at the interior start to think about a cycle of renovating the bathrooms at the high school. So the high school is a building where we've been a heavy exterior work to all these roofs, which are so giantly expensive. But within the interior of the high school, a cycle for kind of a substantial reno of the bathrooms where we get new tile floor. That needs to come before you for discussion, share the information, and shape where we place that and what we ask of it folding into capital. But it will take us several years to come up with a 2 to 3 bathroom rotation to begin to develop a cycle for renovating those. Currently, I have cost estimates going on, so we can put together a discussion and a proposal that would come before you with some cycle of information for what it would take to start to gut and renovate bathrooms on cycle. Gibbons bathrooms are renovated and in good shape. I did a walk down on those the other day. Fales is in good shape. Mill Pond needs some general replacement, but overall the interior of everything looks good. The high school bathrooms need to move forward towards some, more than just repair. So we're starting that discussion.
What's the driver? Do we have to change them in any physical way other than just, in effect, replacing, failed components?
Right, great question. I think that they'll have to get a look at, like, in some, I mean, most of the bathrooms do have an ADA, wheelchair accessible stall. So it should be, it's more like if, you have to replace that floor tile because it's just years of whatever's there. That needs to probably come out in that renovation. What you do with the walls is up for discussion. Like, we'd have to look at it and have a package. The driver is that they need to get more than just a refresh, but they're gonna need all new toilets, all new stalls. The layout should remain the same. Yes,
That's primarily a hardware story. It isn't an awful lot of design.
right, but
So is the think that it'd be done within the school budget or that it would be bid and be a capital project?
I think my guess, based upon what you and I know about these kind of numbers, I mean, Tony said he did a set of bathrooms in Grafton. They came in at $140,000 each for like a reno. Now, if it's $100,000 to do a main floor bathroom with like a big bathroom with like 6 stalls, and you'd have to do 2 a year and rotate them, and that would have to go to capital. And then if we wanted to replace the urinals or sinks on our own at Mill Pond or something like that, those fall within budget. So I'm just putting it on radar that I'm beginning to develop a package for discussion with you so that we can look at thinking about, I don't want to just come in and say, let's do the high school. I want to put together a memo that gives you a package of how are the bathrooms in the district? Let's look at all of them. What's the rotation? Everything's fine here, here, and here. These will be repair cycle within budget, and then these need to be more substantial. All of that would come before you for your guidance and your blessing or your, feelings about it.
Let me ask this question. We were out last year for, let's say, an overview of the condition of the school buildings and all their components. Did we get that report?
So that report, that Russo Bar report is in, but Kelly went back to them and they didn't give her enough on the bathrooms, so she's called them back to get a more detailed development from them on need. They did a basic on the bathrooms, and I said to her, it doesn't meet the benchmark for me of what I need to begin to move forward. I need them to come back. So they're actually coming back next week, and they'll give us an addendum to the report to enhance what information I know you would ask for, how old different things are, what they think about the floors, do they need to come out? They just didn't do a comprehensive enough.
So at that point, then, it'll be distributed to the
Yes.
committee.
Yeah, I think the link for that, I think I gave you the link to the general report already, but I'll look. But we were indicating that it was preliminary and we were pushing back on them for more detailed pages because I was disappointed in the quality of depth in areas. And so Kelly's been really vigilant to go back to them and ask them to come back and give her addendums or she's not gonna pay them the second half. So she's got them kind of between a rock and their second payment. So she's pushing on them right now to get more detail in areas we asked for. So that's a lot of information. Again, we try to stage it out so you can go back and look at these reports. You can ask questions. It'll make more sense than when you get the next one because you can kind of plug those numbers in. I'll end up repeating a little bit about it to you and then give you the next piece. All right. We will need to begin looking at meeting with FinCom. They typically don't request to meet after these first two because they're kind of like logistically clean. But then after the next one, we'll need to sit down and we'll have 1 or 2 of you available to join us and we'll do that discussion session with them. And those are always very, very productive. So I'll update you on those as we move forward. I'm kind of giving as much time as possible. So it'd be nice if, Anita could physically come in at that point. But if not, we'll go ahead and Zoom her in and I'll hold those meetings with a couple of you and FinCom. All right. You get an award for stamina, and I look forward to kind of bringing that stuff forward to you.
Yep, last is the Espit Valley quarterly update.
Yes, so that's a simple vote for you. It's the first of the quarterly reports. I liked this one, and I'm just gonna say, like, if you want to get a picture of what collaborative, like, who's in the collaborative? What are the requirements? How do we function? What are their different program groupings? This is a nice snapshot for you, and Kathy put in some really nice links. So I'm just going to ask that you approve it as the first quarterly update of the start of their year. I'm just saying that if you want for your own, factual learning, it's worth kind of clicking on the links there and taking a look at that report. They're currently, by the second report, I'll give you more, they're struggling with buses. They just developed that bid. We're working on that bid with them to keep it as tight as possible. The board worked on it with them at the last meeting. They also have a renovation project which is stalling their ability to expand program and hurt them financially. It's close to done. We think will be a January open. So I see a recovery of kind of some of the pieces going. They had 2 students pass away. I mean, a lot of these students are very medically fragile. And so that has both a financial impact and an emotional impact. So I think the collaborative had a really hard year last year. And fighting with the bus company is exhausting, and they're not fulfilling their contract anywhere. And it impacts us around the transportation of our most complicated students. And we're paying a lot to push into other types of vans, like I said, it's at an astronomical increased cost. So I have a lot of respect for Kathy and the work they're doing to get these things done for us, and you can look at that report.
Formal vote to accept it, or?
You just have to make a motion to receive it, yeah, like.
I'll make a motion to receive the report.
Second.
Any discussion? None, all those in favor? 5-0-0. Thank you. I think with that, our business tonight is completed. Anyone want to make a motion?
I will move to adjourn.
Good. Second? Somebody?
A second?
Cool. All those in favor? Let's go home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.